Darwin, 1980. The wet season had broken. The days were hot, the nights thick with humidity. In the northern suburb of Moil, a teenager stepped out of her home late at night. No bag, no change of clothes, $4 in her pocket. She walked into the dark and was never seen again. Her name was Ronya Livoni. She was just 16 years old. For over 45 years, the story of Ronya has stayed small. Just a handful of known facts and a lingering question that refuses to fade. Who, if anyone, saw her after she stepped out of that door? This is the Midnight Mystery Archive, and in this episode, we look at the disappearance of Ronya Livoni. Ronya Livoni was born in December 1964 and lived in Moil, a quiet residential suburb of Darwin in Australia's Northern Territory. She was just 16 at the time she disappeared. By all accounts, she was a standard, normal 16-year-old girl, polite, responsible, and not the kind of kid to stir up trouble. Her home life was split. She lived with her mother in Moil, but had regular contact with her father and other family. She was close with her best friend Sarah, and they were actually planning a quote-unquote trip to visit Ronya's family in Mount Isa, about 1,500 kilometers away. However, this trip wasn't for pleasure. They actually intended to run away together, and their plan was to leave on March 10th, 1980 by bus. But the night before, March 9th, 1980, something changed. Ronya told Sarah she wasn't waiting until tomorrow. She was actually going to leave that night. Why? That remains one of the most important unanswered questions. She didn't pack a suitcase. She didn't take clothes. She didn't tell her mother goodbye. She simply walked out of the front door just after 11 p.m. and disappeared into the darkness. She wasn't seen boarding a bus. No taxi drivers reported picking up a girl of her description. There were no phone calls, no notes, no goodbyes. The following morning, when Ronya failed to show up for work, alarm bells began to ring, but not in the way you might expect. This was 1980. The Northern Territory Police at the time, like many law enforcement agencies, had a tendency to label teenage disappearances as runaways. The assumption was that she'd probably just needed a break and that she'd come back soon. And as a result, the initial investigation was minimal. But her family knew different. Sarah later told authorities and the media that Ronya's behavior that night wasn't just impulsive, it seemed final. She had insisted she was leaving. When asked why she couldn't wait until the next day like they had planned, she offered no real explanation. Even more strange, when her bedroom was finally examined, everything was still there. No belongings missing, no clothing taken, no makeup, no travel bag, no diary, no farewell letter. It looked like she'd simply stepped out of the door and had forgotten to return. And what about the money, that $4? In 1980 it wasn't much, but it might have been enough to cover a bus ride, if she'd actually taken one. But no one fitting her description was ever seen on a bus out of Darwin that night, or the next day. Her family reported her missing, but police responses were slow. Investigations were limited. No official missing persons alerts were ever issued. No canvassing of the neighborhood. No railway inquiries, no searching through known hangouts. No one checked to see if maybe she had tried to fly interstate. Days turned into weeks, and the trail went cold. When Ronya didn't turn up to her part-time job the next morning, alarm bells began to ring. This wasn't like her. Her mother Elsa quickly contacted the police, but the response was as disappointing as it was predictable. "She's probably just a runaway," they said, a phrase that too often serves as an off switch for investigations. But those who knew her best didn't believe that, and behind the scenes, something darker had been brewing inside the Livoni household. Ronya hadn't just left home aimlessly. She had a reason. According to accounts shared years later, Ronya's home life had become strained, especially due to Elsa's new boyfriend, Tom Benetti. His presence in the house was a source of conflict. Reports suggest Ronya didn't feel safe or comfortable around him, and in fact, some sources indicate that Ronya may have told her friend Sarah that she feared Benetti, that things had happened which made her want to get away. That night, the night she vanished, Ronya had left the house around 11 p.m. She had told Sarah she planned to go to Mount Isa, as they had originally planned for the next day, possibly to reconnect with family. But she left with no luggage and no identification, and just a few dollars in her hand. Some believe Ronya never made it past her neighborhood, that she was intercepted, perhaps not by a stranger, but by someone who knew her, someone she feared. Perhaps Tom Benetti. The details about Elsa's boyfriend remained scarce in the public record, and no charges were ever filed. But in hindsight, those closest to Ronya believe this man should have been investigated more seriously. At the time, police didn't consider the household situation relevant. They assumed, like so many other cases of missing teens, that she had just chosen to leave. Meanwhile, Sarah and Ronya's older brother Luciano took the search into their own hands. They checked bus stations and gas stations. They went to Mount Isa, to the depot. They called around. They scanned streets and alleyways. One reported sighting did emerge. A girl matching Ronya's description was seen in Mount Isa, but nothing ever came of it. Her bank accounts remained untouched. Her Medicare number was never used again. She had no passport, no driver's license. It was as though she had vanished, completely, utterly, and with finality. In the years that followed, the family dynamic would raise more and more questions. Could someone in her inner circle have known more than they said? Was Elsa's boyfriend ever questioned thoroughly? Did anyone search the home for signs of foul play? The answers remain elusive, because in those critical days, no one really asked. Eventually, police would quietly reclassify her disappearance as suspicious. But by then, time had done what it always does in cold cases. It covered up any evidence that might have existed. And Ronya Livoni became another missing girl whose truth was left behind. In the months following Ronya's disappearance, the silence grew louder. Her name faded from the few headlines. Police stopped calling, but inside her family, especially in the hearts of her brother and best friend, the absence was unbearable. Luciano, her older brother, was relentless. He kept Ronya's face in the public eye when no one else would. He told anyone who would listen, Ronya did not run away. She didn't just vanish because she felt like starting a new life. Something happened, something wrong. And there was one place he kept circling back to: home. Luciano had never trusted Elsa's boyfriend. Even before Ronya disappeared, tensions in the house were high. The man had a controlling presence. There were rumors of verbal abuse, and maybe more. And while it wasn't openly discussed at that time, there were whispers, concerns that Ronya had confided in Sarah about feeling unsafe under her own roof. Years later, Sarah would go on record and say that Ronya had seemed increasingly anxious in the days leading up to her disappearance. She wasn't just planning a casual trip to Mount Isa, she was escaping something, and likely someone. But without evidence of Benetti having done something to Ronya, it was just suspicion. Benetti was never arrested, And as far as public records show, he was never even named as an official person of interest. Whether the police questioned him thoroughly early on remains unclear, but if they did, they never told the family what came of it. It's possible the investigation missed a vital window. In fact, it's almost certain. If something did happen in the house or shortly after Ronya left it, it may have been covered up. Evidence washed away, witnesses silenced by time or fear. For Ronya's loved ones, that uncertainty is torture. You can grieve a death. You can celebrate a life. But how do you process someone being erased? Luciano described the following years as a purgatory of doubt. Every phone call from an unknown number sent his heart racing. Every news article about an unidentified body turned his stomach. He followed false leads, endured hoaxes, and lived with a gnawing guilt, the feeling that he hadn't done enough, that maybe he had missed something. And through it all, he never stopped asking, why didn't the police act sooner? Why wasn't the house treated as a possible crime scene? Why didn't anyone take Ronya's fears seriously? Ronya's mother, Elsa, eventually passed away. Some say she carried her own doubts to the grave. Others believe she knew more than she ever admitted. But without hard evidence or a confession, her role in the aftermath and the truth about her boyfriend remain entangled in the fog of unspoken pain. Today, Ronya Livoni is listed as a missing person. No remains have ever been found. No suspects have ever been named. But the case isn't cold in the hearts of those who loved her. For them, the silence is as loud as ever. And they believe that somewhere, someone still knows what happened on the night of March 9th, 1980. In a case with so little physical evidence, theories tend to cluster into three main categories. One, a voluntary departure. Early on, the police seemed to believe this, of course, because at that time, a teenager disappearing was often treated as a runaway. Stranger abduction. It's less common, but it's a possible scenario. That she encountered someone after leaving home who coerced or forced her away. In 1980 Darwin, the streets were quiet but not empty. Someone walking alone late at night might be noticed by the wrong person. And then, of course, foul play by someone, perhaps someone known. This is the theory that keeps Bonetti's name alive in conversations. His presence in the home, his relationship with Elsa, and the total absence of sightings after Ronya walked out all feed into this suspicion. But again, there's no evidence, and no evidence has been made public linking him to the disappearance. Missing persons cases in the Northern Territory from that area often struggled with the same obstacles. Minimal resources, vast areas to search, and in cases without a clear starting point, nowhere to focus the investigation. Ronya's case stands apart because of how little has changed. Many other disappearances from the same period have been closed or at least advanced through forensic developments. Hers remains as it was 45 years ago. A teenager walked out of her home, and the trail ended at the front door. It's been over 45 years since Ronya Livoni slipped into the night, carrying nothing but a few dollars and the weight of her final choice. Her name has never been removed from the Australian Missing Persons Register. Her case file remains open, and somewhere in a dusty drawer or an officer's inbox, a file marked suspicious circumstances waits for the one tip, the one confession, the one overlooked clue that could finally bring her home. What remains of Ronya's case are questions, deep and uncomfortable ones. Why didn't the police do more? Why wasn't the home thoroughly searched? Why weren't Ronya's fears about the man living in the house treated as serious leads? We may never know what Ronya was running from, but those who knew her best believe that she wasn't just a teenager being impulsive. She was scared, and the person she may have feared wasn't a stranger on the street. It may have been someone inside her own home. Elsa's boyfriend was never charged, never publicly named, but his presence in Ronya's final days and the disturbing dynamic it introduced cast a long, unsettling shadow over this story. If foul play did occur, it's possible the opportunity to prove it vanished within hours of Ronya's disappearance. The Northern Territory's transient population, loose borders, and a lack of robust interagency protocols in 1980 meant many missing persons cases simply fell through the cracks. But her loved ones never stopped looking. Luciano, Sarah, and a few remaining advocates continue to call for answers. They've appealed to the public, they've asked for re-examinations, they've clung to fading hope, because hope is all they have left. In the end, this isn't just a story of a girl who went missing. It's a story of how easy it was, and maybe still is, for a vulnerable person to be erased. No headlines, no searches, no justice. Just the sound of footsteps on a Darwin sidewalk, and the echo of a name no one has forgotten, Ronya Livoni. This has been the Midnight Mystery Archive. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, or wherever you get your podcasts. Remember, new episodes every Tuesday and every Friday. Our next episode will be looking at the case of Laureen Ron in New Hampshire from 1980. Until next time.